The World Robot Conference, companies displayed humanoid robots, industrial robots, and robotic dogs. Some robots were performing factory tasks. Others were designed to interact with humans, but not every demonstration was a success. One robot attempting to fold a shirt struggled for several minutes without completing the task. So China's robot army is still a work in progress, but the military angle is what makes these developments particularly important. China's PLA has already experimented with robotic dogs, unmanned vehicles, and drones for reconnaissance, logistics, and other combat-related roles. And that raises the critical question for India. Could increasingly capable robots eventually be deployed in difficult terrain along the line of actual control? Could they carry supplies, conduct surveillance, operate in dangerous areas, or even perform missions where sending soldiers would be too risky? That possibility is still speculative. The material available does not establish that China is currently deploying humanoids combat robots along the LAC. But the direction of China's technology push is clear. The combination of robotics, artificial intelligence, and autonomous systems are rapidly expanding, and China is investing heavily in all three. There is also a growing technology rivalry with the United States. Washington has already raised national security concerns over advanced Chinese robots, including robotic dogs and humanoid systems. So this is no longer simply about robots running faster or looking more human. It is about who will dominate the next generation of machines that can see, think, move, and act with increasing autonomy. I'm joined by Major General Sudhakarji, Defense and Geopolitical Expert, Adya Madhavan, Research Analyst from Takshashila Institutions, Anushka Saxena, Associate Fellow, Takshashila Institution. I thank all of you for joining me. Let me start with General Sudhakarji. So I have taken these visuals from the Robotic Olympiad. The larger focus of this conversation is, does China has the material and intellectual capacity to deploy or engage with Indian army differently this time?
Yeah, good evening, Karthikeya. Thank you for inviting me for your show. I have no worries. There are two brilliant and intellectually blessed young ladies in the panel, so they will be better empowered to actually articulate their thoughts. And I won't be wrong to classify them under the heading of Gen Z, so they are better equipped. But since I have had some hands-down experience along the border, let's not be surprised by certain new things which are happening along the line of actual control. When I was commanding Eastern Ladakh, I had been witness to a tank with a medium machine gun mounted on top and without any soldiers. So I had raised the point at that point in time. This was in 2017.
Which sector?
The Eastern Ladakh. You have that Pangongso and those kind of places. So when the issue was raised, when it is not a happening thing, then people actually put you under the brand head of an alarmist. So at that point in time, India was nowhere. India has started galloping because I was in Sunnyvale a few months back in the Bay Area. The way people are talking that they rated India as #1 in robotics. So I was shocked and surprised, where the hell the robots are operating in India. When I came back, I didn't find any. But when I went to the Bangalore with help of one of my friends, he took me through. Thereafter, I was not entirely partially convinced. So India is, top-notch, if not top 5, maybe in the top 10. But people say that India is in the reckoning. So having said that, when you were discussing about China, China has got a different kind of a limitation. And that limitation, I think in your preamble, you have brought it out or indirectly hinted. That limitation is about the aging population. So while certain things may be relevant to China, they may not be at the moment very relevant to India. Robotics is a happening thing world over. And robotics, autonomous platforms, then artificial intelligence, energy storage, and other things, semiconductor and other things are happening. But why is China planning this? Because by McKinsey's forecast, by 2030, the world is going to have 400 to 800 million people looking out for jobs. they will be jobless. And they have also further carried out a study that 12% of these people are going to be Chinese. So when a thing like this comes up, and with the aging population, the median age of China being much higher than that of India,
Okay.
we are still enjoying the between
No,
29 and 30 years.
sorry, sorry, I'm interrupting you, sir. Sir, the larger issue is this marriage, Anushka, this marriage between drones, AI, and robotics. There are books people have written, The Last War, for example, in which they have elucidated various battle ground scenarios, that the China this time can take India by surprise. But my question is slightly different. One thing is to demonstrate your civilian technology to give an impression that you are far ahead. It's like you win the war without fighting, the morale issue. But there is also another thing, Anushka, and that is ability to weaponize civilian technology. Do you think that the Chinese have that capacity?
Right. Well, thanks so much for that. I think if there is one unique thing about the Chinese defense industrial base, or even the People's Liberation Army for that matter, is precisely that the idea that they have been able to create what in academic jargon you would refer to as a spin on effect, which is the translation of civilian and commercial breakthroughs into military technologies. Traditionally, militaries around the world have operated on the spin-off effect. So the GPS, for example, or a handheld satellite was invented first in the military domain, used by the US military in the Gulf War, and then translated into the GPS that we use on all of our phones on maps. But the Chinese are going the other way and saying that, look, if you're unitary or if you're the manufacturer of the Ultra, you do the innovation, you do the breakthrough, we'll subsidize some of your research, and we'll let you reinvest your profits in advanced research and application. And then if we find the performance of that drone or that robot useful, we're gonna through official channels procure it for the purposes of the PLA. Now, one challenge for the PLA's deployment for either drones or humanoids in the Western Theatre Command, which overlooks India, is this, right? These robots racing in the environment of 25 degrees Celsius is starkly different from them racing or working at an altitude of 4,000 meters, which is where China's altitude disadvantage, which is often talked about, comes in, right? Lithium cells that power these humanoids, for example, significantly reduce in usage capacity when they go up to that height. So I think there has to be that little bit of a grain of salt that we have to take when we're thinking through all the autonomous deployments that China can carry out along the LAC. This is not to say that that's not already happening, but the utility of these scouts is that they are expendable. They can walk ahead of the infantry, surveil the space, carry maybe 25 to 40 kilograms of ration, or maybe a gun here and there. And then if they're shot down, they're shot down. And then the infantry can use the information collected by the unmanned ground vehicle or the aerial vehicle to engage in the kill chain and engage in strikes, right? So so yes, they're leveraging that commercial technology, but its application on the ground on the mainland and in the high altitudes of the Himalayas will be different.
Okay, that's a point of view. But Adya, should we discount it, or should we take it seriously is the issue? Because so many things which we used to see in the Hollywood films where in 60s and 50s, you look at the you look at the spin-off that happened. For example, Star Trek. You know, people thought that this is sort of an impossible technology, but then you have a civilian spin-off, and then you have a running mobile industry. So technologies do change warfare. For example, I'll give you an historical example. Gunpowder, twice Baba was unable to breach the Lodis. But the third time when they got the gunpowder from Ottomans, they were able to win that war. And hence the empire came in. Or for example, to see the new technology which Shivaji deployed against the Mughals after 200 years, which was cavalry, mobile cavalry, with weapons from the French, and they were able to break into the Mughal defense technique of holding siege to a fort and then try to break them in with gunpowder, very heavy guns, you know. So this borrowing from that famous steel, guns and germs, you know, this defense technology breakthrough, why shouldn't we take it lightly? We should be taking it seriously, because it really, by end of the day, changes the game. Like tank in First World War, or a stringer in the Afghanistan battlefield, or people forget drones in Armenian Azerbaijan battlefield, which actually allowed Azerbaijan to defeat Armenia after 20 years of sort of a deadlock in the fight. Adya.
Hi, Karthikeya. First of all, thank you for your question. Like Anushka said, implementation, whether they're actually deployable in many of these conditions and many of these environments, is something that needs to be looked at. But sure, of course, we should take a lot of these emerging technologies seriously, because as testing continues, as different prototypes take place, as there's innovation in the field, maybe people will come up with some measures to bypass some of these conditions. Having said that, I think it's worth noting that with a lot of these technologies, between the time, there's the first alarmist wave of panic where we say, oh my God, killer robots are going to take over the world, and actual widespread deployment, there's a lot of conversations, especially in international forums and arms control circles, that take place about their actual deployment and what it means, and what kind of guardrails need to be put in place. To give you some context, for example, for autonomous systems and autonomous weapons, which are, the pinnacle of people's concern about a lot of these platforms, the United Nations group of governmental experts have been deliberating for many, many years now, and they're still talking about what the definitional challenges are, what autonomy means in this context, what it means to be a lethal autonomous weapon system, and what that entails, how different countries understand what oversight means. So I think, yes, of course, we should take these seriously, but our response, in my opinion, should be twofold, because on one hand, yeah, India needs to develop their own capabilities and all of that. But on the other hand, I think India also needs to actively participate in some of these conversations, which are likely to shape the norms for the coming decade, and are also likely to lay down the rules that are likely to govern this landscape, especially over the next many years.
But General Sudhakar, most of the, I would say, tech development post 1945 have been done in a very secretive way. Development of weapons, warfare, missiles, they have been done in a very secretive way by various nation states, by various militaries and by various armies. For example, and that's where I want to lead the discussion to, the development of AI, which is part and parcel of the private sector, it's obtruse. People have no idea as to what is being developed. It's almost like, the trials and errors in terms of biological warfare, when people say that the COVID is actually something which escaped from an experimental lab. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the fact is that we have no clarity on what AI is capable of. We only read in newspapers that AI started to think for itself. It sneaked into some other software, but the fact is this is just tip of the iceberg. Now marry this AI with this robotics, as what Anushka was saying, disposable soldiers. The first wave of disposables, it changes the game, sir. Can you unmute yourself?
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Compliments to you for raising a very fine and one of the central issues in the subject. And before going ahead, let me just dispel all speculations and skepticism. It's already happening. It's happening. It's just that it started pretty late in India. AI mission is just about, I think, a year and a half old in India itself. Autonomous platforms we have taken off in earnest, just about 1 year old. We have a long way to go. Although people who are very responsible, they have been in many of the international seminars I have attended, many of the Indian colleagues, they talk such, chest beating, keep on thumping that we are here, there and all that. We are nowhere, to be very honest. So to answer your question, it will take time. But if you go to the American or Western countries, you will come to realize that AI is very rapidly spreading. When I talk to my son, he is in Apple and he's been upgraded to hardware now. He's in the managerial job. He says, Papa, the speed at which ChatGPT and OpenAI and all these things are moving, every day there is a new thing coming. and you just have to punch in. Before you realize the answer is there, you don't require 50 people, 100 people to find a solution. So that is the speed at which it is moving. But if you allow me just one more minute, I just want to highlight, give a context. When I was in Bay Area interacting with our IITians, certain things came to light. There are 5 disruptive technologies which the Western universities have carried out research. They are going to rule the roost. They are going to dominate the entire spectrum of technological advancement. This disruptive technology, the market value today is around $19 trillion. And by 2030, it is going to gallop and jump to around $220 trillion. What are these disruptive? Some of them we have covered. First, to start with artificial intelligence. Second, in energy storage. Third is robotics. This is to dispel that particular skepticism in the mind, whether it is going to be implementable or not. And last point, if you allow me, I'll just come to. Fourth point is multiomics. Multiomics deals with life, health, biology, and medicines. And the last one is public blockchain. These 5 things predominantly are going to actually dominate the entire spectrum of the market.
I'll sum up what you're saying. Artificial intelligence,
last one,
quantum
Karthik,
computing.
last one. You're talking about the robotics. It is already been deployed in the Indian Army. The place which I am mentioning, for the sake of brevity and being classified, I am not supposed to disclose the place. They are lugging the heavy logistics. They are carrying the patients. They are being used for surveillance and intelligence acquisition. They are being used for those kind of jobs which manually would take a lot of effort and time. They are being used for inclement weather, which the young lady actually brought out, that lithium. Lithium actually, it has got different efficiency level at different altitude. It is happening. And in a short time frame, within 1.5 years' time, India has actually gone to such a kind of enviable height. Our young people, rather than spending time at Jantar Mantar, they will do well to go to Siachen Glacier, go to Ladakh, and see as to how our own people have overtaken Americans and Chinese in many ways.
Okay. So basically 5 things you have spoken about: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, Internet of Things, additive manufacturing, which people say 3D printing, and blockchain. So I know these are the 5 disruptive technology you're speaking about. And the most, I would say, the proof of the pudding would be controlling quantum computing, because that really changes the game, quantum computing. But Anushka, coming back to you, imagine marriage of AI, imagine marriage of quantum computing with the autonomous drone systems and its deployment. It changes the game.
Yeah. Well, look, on quantum, I'll be very straightforward. If Richard Feynman didn't understand it, I will not claim to understand it either. But clearly, if the applications are such that, for example, a submarine that is supposed to be undetectable under deep waters will suddenly be detectable because of the kind of calculations and sensing that quantum can carry out, or the problem of what is the best formation or the best flank and deployment that a military like the PLA needs to undertake to decisively defeat India or the US in the Taiwan Strait conflict. Those are calculations quantum will make really easy. Then, it's worth it that investors around the world, without even seeing the proven commercial application of quantum, are investing so many millions and billions of dollars in the technology, right? But yes, just on the bit about the marriage of AI with some of these platforms, there are 2 ways of applying autonomy to a system, right? Or autonomy in military. There is the Lavender and the Maven method, which is the deployment of software for assessment, for tracking, for surveillance, and then the targeting is done by a conventional platform. And then there is the autonomy method, where you integrate AI or you integrate quantum or some of these breakthrough technologies into the platform. For the Chinese, the latter is the preferred method, even as commercially or domestically they've taken on the former. So the issue is, how much will they allow for a robot or a drone to engage in the complete kill chain and then change the future of battle? Because as an expendable sound, if you're just carrying ammunition or ration, it's okay. But the moment you say that your task as a body that can think for itself, and potentially with quantum also...
Anushka, you are the PLA expert here. You are the expert here. Look at this data. China's National Development and Reform Commission established a state-backed venture fund aiming to attract 138 billion over 20 years for AI and robotics. I mean to say, if that is the level of commitment, $138 billion in 20 years, I mean, who's going to compete? I mean, where is the competition? Maybe Americans?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is no competition. We already know that Chinese humanoids occupy 95% of the global market. That is in the commercial domain. Most of that is going into exports. Even at the World Defense Show, the humanoid that was displayed by the Chinese in Riyadh was actually meant for exports. They've also exported it to Cambodia. But all of the best bits, probably of the most autonomous or the most cutting edge robots, they will be keeping for themselves, even if a civilian body like NDRC is investing in it. So it goes back to the first point you made, which is about how well do the Chinese leverage their commercial sector, and turns out they leverage it really well. And this is kind of an advantage that perhaps the Chinese have and that the Americans don't, right? The Americans, of course, now industrial policy is changing. Now the US government wants to extract greater alignment from the private sector, but it didn't always used to be that case, right? So Lockheed can go ahead and do what it wants, and Elon Musk can go ahead and do what he wants. But in China, that's not the case.
Okay, let me be the devil's advocate, and let me take this question to Adya, and then we can rotate it. Look what the cheap technology has done for Iran in the war. Americans have not been able to push their aircraft carriers through the Gulf of Oman to the Persian Gulf. It couldn't happen. All their aircraft carriers had to be parked at a safe distance in the Arabian Sea. That was the number one consequence. The second thing, Americans were unsuccessful in their special forces operation because of the cheap robotics, AI minus drones or those blind drones. But that's the precursor of things to come. Look what has happened. And even in the Operation Sindoor, because there was so much of use of the robotics in AI, the conflict reaction time got compressed for the Indian side. Because that's what the Pakistanis were doing. It was compressing the time for us. So when we look at this, this is more like a gimmick. That's not the way the soldiers would work. But I'm saying that it's like a watch. It's you marry robotics with the body, and you create a sort of, not a super soldier, but a far more efficient soldier, or far more a soldier which can endure more. So that's where my conversation is leading up to. I'm not saying it's going to be a sci-fi on the Tibetan plateau, but in terms of the ability for one person to do a lot of things, that will multiply for the Chinese soldiers, and that is very worrying.
See, I think when we talk about, since you brought in Iran, I think when we talk about these cheaper, more attritable platforms, the biggest argument is, of course, cost asymmetry. And I mean, look at Ukraine, what they've done with their loitering munitions and some of their drones. I mean, they're between like $500 to about $2,000, and they're built from a lot of civilian components. There's a lot of dual-use components floating around in the market. And it's easier to build platforms like that than it is to go through more proprietary defense industrial supply chains. And
just a point in case I forgot. Just a point in case, Adya, I forgot. The Russians had to create a stupid turret on top of their tanks because they were afraid of these drones. If you remember the cover of Economist, they had a huge white tank, I think maybe T-72 or T-80, and it was covered with some sort of a chapri. And then I realized that it was covered with the chapri because that was the top is the most vulnerable part. It was vulnerable to javelins, it was vulnerable to handle the drones, and they had to do it. So, you see, the tanks became useless.
See, the thing is, I don't think tanks have become useless. I don't think missiles have become useless. I think they still retain their own place in the order of things in the way conflicts are fought. When people say, drone warfare...
Sorry, they lost the edge.
I just think drones are going to add to the way battles are fought. And a lot of these air defense systems, for example, aren't designed to deal with, a $500 drone. If they're designed to take out a more sophisticated cruise missile, then they're not likely to be able to function at the scale or the altitude or, for that matter, the number of drones in a swarm. And I think there's a mismatch in terms of the platforms used there. And I think that's what the advantage is of these cheaper, most attritable systems. Second of all, I don't think the thing with drones is I don't think cheap is synonymous with unsophisticated anymore. And I think that's what can be seen with Iran, because they weren't trying to come up with an MQ-9B Reaper or whatever. Iran manufactured drones that were good enough for what they wanted to do, and they were able to fulfill the functions they wanted at a price which made it reasonable enough for you to lose those platforms. If one of their platforms hit the target that they were meant to, they could afford to lose the 15 others, 20 others in the same operation.
Okay. Sudhakarji, I'll take the closing comment from you. Do you really feel that, or since you have served in those sectors, that we need to do more in terms of equipping our soldiers? I think that's the truth. We were taken by surprise in Galwan. The way they indecently remade the batons, and that led to a lot of casualties. That was not the case earlier. Keel laga ke jo istemal kiya tha. It's a very rudimentary sort of a weaponization they did, but they took us by surprise.
Yeah, to respond to your question, quick reflection is take the case study or example of Ukraine, like the young lady has brought out. In Ukraine, there are certain stretches on the ground in battlefield where, because of paucity of troops, Ukraine has run out of young people in the force. They're highly acutely deficient of these people, so they have started deploying the humanoids or the robots. And the robots are manning the machine gun. There is a case in point which is unfortunately not come in the open domain. They have held up the attack launched by Russians for not 1 day, 2 days, 7 days. Who have done it? The humanoids, the robotics. The same robots, they have actually carried the logistic. They evacuated the casualties from the front line. They have carried ammunition. They have carried the medicine to the forward areas, communication equipment. So therefore, there is a case to be studied, and India is already applying it very extensively, I would say, but much more.
I'll add one thing. Please address that issue. I should have actually brought it in the first part of the conversation. If you recall the coverts which the Mossad did inside Iran, couple of them were done through marriage of AI and robotics. If you recall, the assassination of one of the scientists, number 2 or number 3 in the nuclear program, was done through a rifle that was kept inside a car and was operated from Tel Aviv.
Correct.
Now that could not have been possible without some sort of a better computing, some sort of an AI, some sort of a electric connection, and some sort of a robotic drone ability. And it was a point blank kill.
Absolutely.
So
Karthik,
my question is, those technologies are restricted to special forces. Imagine those technologies get regimentalized, normal regiments. That is the transition I'm trying to talk about. They are in use, I agree with you. But imagine they become standardized. I think that's the better word. If they become standardized.
Point well taken. It's a great point. And because for every new thing that comes, there is a thing, management, they teach you. There is a management change. First, you will go through the stage of denial. This human being is stereotyped in its behavior and response matrix. From denial to resistance to reconciliation, then you come to adaptation and finally acceptance. To assimilate a new thing, adopt it to the environment or the new ecosystem takes time. It is not simply that you induct the equipment and expect the soldiers to start responding the way they are supposed to respond. So what I'm trying to bring out is, the central issue which you are highlighting, Karthikeya, is the integration. This disruptive technology, marriage, you're talking about marrying one component to another facet. There is an integration required which has been more than adequately proven and also achieved during Operation Sindoor, but we don't have to bask in the glory of the past. We need to look ahead. What is expected? You have heard about the news. For more than 5 aircrafts have landed at Noor Khan base. More than 10 Chinese aircrafts have landed somewhere in Muri or someplace at Karachi. There are new technologies which are coming in opposite us. They are going to be applied against India. So what best can India do? It should be this way, that just because the robotics is picking up momentum world over, should we blindly follow robotics, or we have to make a via media, or we have to do with whatever best is possible with what we have? Because ultimately the test of pudding will lie in proactiveness of India. This time India cannot accept any such Pahalgam carnage in any form taking place, India, it will be damn a country as a mightiest populous country or a largest country with a shining spot in the economy. We need to be proactive. How can you actually preempt Pakistan or China on their soil before they plan something like this taking and launch it against us? That is the hallmark of efficiency and I would say a forward-looking kind of a roadmap that the country should prepare.
Absolutely. I would say the surprise element, I mean to say we were able to give it back to Pakistan because of BrahMos and our integrated networks, but they also took us by surprise when they used a different version of that PLA supplied weapon. You know, that was a surprise. We had to recalibrate our strategy. But the entire thrust of my discussion was the element of surprise. What we see is just one part of what they want to show. But there is also another aspect which perhaps is far more covert and dangerous and not so good for our soldiers being deployed there. And on this note, I close this conversation. Thank you, Adya. Thank you, Anushka. And thank you, Major General Sudhakarji, for joining me on this. But our next on point is also very interesting. It is about self-reliance and helicopter engine technology. HAL and France Safran have joined hands to develop Aravali engine for the India's next generation military helicopters. After a short break.
अर्जुन कुछ भी पढ़े मेमोरी में नहीं रहता।
Take it, date not bites. No added sugar, preservative के बिना डेट्स, बादाम, पिस्ता, काजू और शहद से तैयार किया गया Lion Dates Nut Bites. Lion Date Nut Bites.
The fallout from the deadly ambush on the church leaders in Manipur is now rapidly escalating across the hill district.
Unfortunately, the government has not taken appropriate action still.
Commitment to the stories that come out from Northeast, and we'll continue to cover them in depth and entirety.
News 9, in your interest.